Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Portland State University Studio MFA Remote Artist Talk series. This series is sponsored by generous contributions from the Wingate Foundation and the Deep Rees Professorship Fund by Harold and Arlene Schnitzer Care Foundation. We would like to start this event by acknowledging that Portland State University rests on the traditional village sites of the MOMA, Kathlame, Clackamas, Bends of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Multnomah is a band of Chinooks that lived in this area. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. This series brings together artists, curators, and critics from a variety of disciplines to explore the subjects of their work before a live audience. All of our lectures for winter term are being held remotely and live streamed through our PSU YouTube channel. Please follow our Instagram account at PSU Studio MFA to learn more about artist talks in the future. At the end of this morning's presentation, we'll be having a Q&A with Nicole Awai in the MFA cohort, and we'll also be fielding questions through the live stream chat. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Nicole Awai. Nicole Awai is a multimedia artist, and she earned her master's degree in multimedia art from the University of South Florida in 1996. She attended the Showhegan School of Painting and Sculpture residency in 1997 and was an artist in residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 2000. Awai was a featured artist in 2005 initial public offering series at the Whitney Museum of American Art and was awarded the John Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant in 2011, as well as the Art Matters Grant in 2012. Her work has been included in various museum exhibitions, including Greater New York, New Art in New York Now at MOMA 2000, the Biennale of Ceramic and Contemporary Art in Italy 2003, Open House Working in Brooklyn 2004, and Infinite Island Contemporary Caribbean Art in 2007, both at the Brooklyn Museum, the 2008 Busan Biennale in South Korea, the Pacific Standard Time LA and LA2, the Getty Foundation Initiative Exhibition Circles and Circuits 1, History and Art of the Chinese Caribbean at the California African American Museum, and Circles and Circuits 2, Contemporary Art of the Chinese Caribbean at the Chinese American Museum, along with the Relational Undercurrents, Contemporary Art of the Caribbean Archipelago at the Museum of Latin American Art, and the Highlight Network exhibition, New Monuments for New Cities. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Nicole.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Okay, I guess it's all in my hands now. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So I was thinking about starting today's talk, focusing probably on the aspects of materiality in my work and why, as somebody who identifies as a painter, I see myself as an expansive painter. I think for me, that means that I believe that painting is this contiguous language that is not necessarily medium specific. So the image that you're seeing on the screen right now actually is the place where the oozing materiality in my work originated actually in 2003. Well, the Biennale for Ceramic Contemporary and Contemporary Art was in 2003, but I went to Italy in 2002 to make this work. And prior to going to make the work, the master ceramicist that I was working with asked me to fax him, because back then we weren't online in the same way like we are now, to fax him drawings of what I wanted to make. And this was a very interesting opportunity with 7 international curators who would each select 3 or 4 contemporary artists. And we were, they weren't selecting ceramic artists, they were selecting contemporary artists to work in this medium in Italy and on what's known as the Ligurian coast, where there's this tradition of ceramic. But there was also in the early 20th century, it used to be a place where contemporary artists at the time used to come and work with these ceramic studios as well. So Picasso went down there, you know, with Wilfredo Lam, Fontana, and all these folks. So it's, you know, they were reviving that tradition. And the biennial happened in 2003 and then had another iteration a couple of years afterwards. And I think unfortunately stopped, but it was really an interesting experience. And I made these things. And this is called Oozing Red, White, and Blue. And it was at the museum in Savona. There was a series of locations for the biennial. So this is how this started. And actually, a drawing series came out of that. And the drawing series was initially based on those drawings that I sent to the master ceramicist. You know, I remember I did the drawings and people were like, oh, we love these drawings, we love these drawings. And yeah, after I returned from Italy, I started making these drawings based on those original drawings. So, you know, I really drafted something in isometric projection, as you would if you were trying to do sort of blueprint drawings for folks. And actually, you know, so this was the basis for the beginning of this drawing series called Specimens from Local Ephemera, where the ooze is apparent. And what you're seeing in this actually is this rum bottle. There's a rum bottle. It's called it's from the rum producers Angostura in Trinidad. That is this little drummer guy, limbo drummer guy figure, and it's one of those bottles that's strange enough. You know, it comes from where I come from initially, which is Trinidad. But it's not something I brought with me. It's something that, you know, disparate American friends have given me over the years. And I decided to pair this with a Disney Tarzan action figure that I picked up on the street in Brooklyn. So it's this idea too of these things that people are giving me, items that I think they identify with me as this Caribbean body moving around in this American space. And I started making things with it and decided that I wanted to create this world. I called it Specimens from Local Ephemera. And in this world, sort of tropes and ideas from our world takes on physical manifestation. So the pairing of these two things, sort of two tropes, sort of brought up this conversation about our early 20th century colonial experiences throughout the Americas and places like Africa. This drawing here in the series was actually in the show at the Brooklyn Museum open house. And it's actually the place where the ooze that I was thinking about, this ooze, became black in color. So in this one, you're seeing sort of the Tarzan figures in that emerging ooze in this double-sided figure. And actually that was interesting too, because that was something that somebody gave me as well. A friend of mine who had these a box of sort of this African American, like black sort of you know, trinkets and ornaments of sort of that are sort of you know, considered, you know, not for polite society now. And she offered this topsy-turvy doll to me, which I had never seen before. So it's one of those dolls, you know, you on one side it's the plantation mistress, on the other side it's plantation mammy, and you flip it, you know, the skirt flips and you can see one is hidden, one is not. And I just thought this thing was so bizarre. It really belonged in this parallel world, local ephemera, which is the world of in between, as far as I'm concerned. So in between dimensions, in between sort of an experience, a way to sort of look at all of these things and examine it. And I was using this format of sort of technical drawing and drafting. And this is also, you see this color strip is where I started using this color strip that consisted of nail polish colors. I called it the sensation code. And it's just interesting at that time, I was observing that the naming of the nail polish colors, when the makeup industry, started to really reflect the urban American experience, especially that the experience being multicultural and speaking to many voices in the Americas. Later on in that series, towards the end, because you start making something and people like it, they want you to keep making it, and you, the artist, get sick of it. But anyway, towards the end of the drawing series, this is one of the last ones I did. And once again, the ooze was black. And, really, I think I started to really think about this one and started at that time to wonder, well, why did I sort of rest and stay on the ooze, being black in color. So in, I think it was 2012, when I was, in 2012, 2013, when I really did start thinking about, about the ooze and it being black in color. Having gone actually to a residency where I had made some ceramics, I think I have it in the slides, I'll come a little later, where the black was still there, and thinking about, well, why, what is the influence on this? Anyway, long story shorter, hopefully. That year, I think in 2013, I did a panel discussion at CAA called, what was it called? It was about expansive painters. I think it was called Expanding the Elastic Frontier. And my friend Anna Kunz and Daniel Tegadar and I, before the conference, months before, were discussing what it is we were going to talk about, and read this this essay article called, I think it was called Painting and Performance anyway. But it reminded me of something that then the Bangladesh had said about the influences on her work. She was talking about the oil slicks on the bayou in Louisiana. And it just made me think about coming from someplace like Trinidad, where we have the pitch lake, which the pitch lake is this lake of tar, of asphalt, the largest in the world. And maybe somehow that might have been some sort of reference to me and this black oozing materiality. Anyway, so I when I got the Art Matters grant, I went to Trinidad. I did a residency there with a contemporary art space called Alice Yard. And I went to the Pitch Lake and I actually took this picture while I was there. And it is it's a little area. I was pointing my camera down by my feet in this little area wasn't even half the length of my foot was this. And I called this image Pitch Pot. And to me, it really brought to me the understanding of maybe some of the things I was thinking about in terms of materiality. I was realizing that what I was identifying is this sort of inextricable connection between narrative and materiality, sort of history and the material world around us. And to me, it was reflected in this image. I can see all of our mythologies, in the Americas around the creation of things, especially, different stages of mankind. We find ways to talk about the things we don't understand. Well, I think I saw all of that in this image. And when I was there and doing that residency in they had this small exhibition space that was very unique, that had a glass door front. I did this painting installation and used the paint. There is an asphaltum paint that they make that's a sealant, and it's used everywhere, all over the world, in our streets, in our shipping, as a sealant everywhere. And I actually used that paint to make this, along with, acrylic paint, nail polish, and the other things, because I wanted that smell to permeate this small space. So when you stood in there, you had this, not just this visual experience, but you had this olfactory kind of experience as well. And you can really, the environment and the painting sort of physically in your senses wrapped itself around you. Okay. Oh yeah, there. Okay. So just before I went down to Trinidad for that, in anticipation of that, I made this one work the beginning, the first work in the Vistas series. And I was thinking about the secondary meaning of the word vista, which is an anticipated or imagined event. Thinking about anticipating going and having this experience. And I had made this piece. And it's interesting because when I came back, I thought to myself that even beforehand, it really kind of captured some of what I was thinking when I was in that space, you know, and realized I wasn't interested in making work about that space particularly, but I think that space really spoke to what I was trying to achieve with materiality in my work, and maybe what I wanted to do with this body of work. So this is the first of the vistas. This one is called Vista 1, Curling. And, you know, I wanted to make this thing that it seemed temporary. It seemed like it was in flux. It seemed like if you turned your head and looked away, it might disappear. You know, it's curling off the wall. It's resisting, you know, it's resisting and doesn't want to be fixed in one place. So I was using resins and I think different materials, charcoal, nail polish, all sorts of stuff in this one. There you have it. Yeah, there it is, coming off the wall, resisting the wall. This work is interesting because this work was originally in my one-person show at the Vilczek Foundation in 2011 as part of my exhibition, Almost Undone. And I was telling you guys, I was thinking about, oh, it's time to be done with this drawing series, right? And I think in my practice, I go in and out of, you know, sort of what is two-dimensional and three-dimensional and what is in between. And I really thought that those drawings wanted the reason to release themselves back into our space and into our world. So I started making the work for that show that included some of those two-dimensional drawings, but then some of these, I call them wall and or floor paintings. That was sort of the release of that materiality. And it's also the first time that I really started painting with the nail polish as well, and not just using it as that, you know, coating demarcation thing in the drawings. So I was actually pouring nail polish into the wet resin and onto the dry resin and using other paints and other materials as well. And this is called I Want to Be a Lone Star. I want as opposed to I want. And, you know, really finding that interesting. It's a name for a nail polish color by OPI. And I think it really spoke to sort of the immigrant experience, but it spoke to the immigrant experience now, but it also reached back to the early 20th century when the exotics and the immigrants at the time that were coming into the United States were a lot of Eastern Europeans. And, you know, there was this distrust of them as well. They were seen as these mysterious, sensual characters, but still sort of untrustworthy. So you had, you know, you had screen stars like Marlene Dietrich, etc. And she was always, you know, positioned as, you know, sexy, but traitor, you know, appealing, but scary. But it's interesting later, it's, you know, they assimilated it more into sort of the society. And then later on, you had people like Zsa Zsa Gabor, and all of a sudden they were all accepted. And we're in a moment too of a sort of, you know, another wave of immigrants assimilating, but those, you know, being immigrants of color, the question is, are they going to be fully accepted like those previous folks were? Anyway, long story. So here you see it as on the wall, yeah. And here you see it in the original exhibition, it was on the floor. And just interesting, I like to play with that because people really perceive these things differently, whether it's on the wall or on the floor. Another one from the Vistas series. I think this one was named after two nail polish colors. Now You See Me Pounce and Pounce. And this one, I think for me, really spoke to the over-sexualization of Black bodies in our society. Yeah, that's all I want to say about that one. The next series coming off of sort of the vistas is something called the No Escape Hatch series. And it was interesting. I was looking at, there are 50 islands in the world that they kind of identify as these, that they're not inhabited, but they have sort of, they're being either used to, by governments or for research, but they're interesting in that they have really a very nefarious kind of past and are really these places that, sort of neo-colonial strongholds that we really don't know about. It's interesting, but they also sort of speak to climate issues right now as well, and how island nations are endangered. Anyway, so these were the things that were coming in, into my thoughts, the effects of all of those things, and thinking about the ooze as being, this is when I really started thinking about the ooze in a way of being a site for creation and destruction, the site that sort of posits and holds everything. And it's this irresistible force, right? And so, you have this hatch, this utility hatch or submarine hatch in this case. And it's interesting, it says do not block, but of course it can't resist. The ooze is going to go wherever the ooze wants to go. Here's a little detail. I think that was No Escape Hatch 3, and this is No Escape Hatch 4. And in this one, actually, that little figure is me. And I'm standing there. And I don't show what my expression is, but I think I'm standing there and I'm drinking this ice cold beer as I watch, the ooze sort of break the boundaries, come into my space, I guess I'm resigned to whatever will happen next. Yeah, so the ooze, contains all and everything and all experience, all history. Time is elastic in it, and yes, and everything is in flux. This work was in a show called Alchemy in 2018, and spring of 2018 was interesting because things really started to ramp up in terms of the whole conversation around removing monuments, all the sort of police action against Black bodies in society was really starting to ramp up as well. And I was getting prepared to go to the Joan Mitchell residency in New Orleans. And at the same time, Brick Media Arts, the curators there, asked me to be in this show, and they called it Alchemy, and they said it's about artists like yourself who use untraditional materials to make artwork about all sorts of topics, social, cultural, political, ecological, etc. And I thought it was interesting, but I didn't know what to make. Anyway, so it took me a while, but I think in that moment I was in this hyper-awareness state and made this thing. But this thing is, maybe I should tell you this first. Hold on, where is it? What? No, it's not there. I thought the monument was in there. Okay, sorry, I thought it was, or maybe it got all mixed up. Anyway, there's a monument at Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn, and I'd been passing it in my neighborhood for years, but it was the first time that spring that I stopped and I really looked at it and noticed this African-American figure who's in this array of the sculptures that's there. And he's this scout soldier figure who he's crouching low to the ground, and he's holding this gun propped up, on his elbows, he's crouching. And it just seemed to me that he was so calm and prepared, ready for whatever was about to come battle-wise, that he became my alchemist for me. And all of a sudden, I really started to understand and make the connections between this idea around sort of narrative and materiality, but wanted to make this creation myth in which he was part of, as we have all these wonderful creation myths in the Americas, including the creation myth about the Pitch Lake, where two tribes were at war, and one tribe won and they ate hummingbirds, and the gods were upset because hummingbirds are sacred. And overnight, the Pitch Lake, this thing came up and engulfed the village, and that was the myth, which is so interesting. Anyway, I wanted to make my own sort of creation myth site and made this. So this is called Persistent Resistance of the Liquid Land. And there's all these symbols that are embedded there that are his symbols and incantations in his alchemic process. Alchemy is that ancient medieval practice of, which I think actually is, I think of them as artists, because with artists, they would think that they can sort of transform, lower metals into gold and other, chemicals into healing, elixirs, etc. Just interesting. So right as that show wrapped up, or was wrapping up, folks from the New York Times asked me to make a work for an editorial they were having, and instead of an op-ed, they called it an op-art, where they invited six artists. So myself, Dred Scott, Titus Kafer, Ariel Jackson, who I was teaching at the time, Kenya Robinson, and the Keen Ijomi, to sort of, they wanted us to think about monuments to replace, the monuments that had been removed from all of these sites, throughout America, that had recently been moved, the recently divested plinths, so to speak, anyway. And I think they called it, what was it called? It was called Monuments for a New Era. And so, just finishing that work, I thought, who better to be, to be in this, but once again, my African-American Sailor Scout figure. And, I wanted to create not really an idea for a physical monument, but a mythological monument. And I was thinking about all those creation myths in the Americas, but also sort of the folklore and myths that the enslaved people, Africans, had in the Americas around escape, flight as a means of escape, but also that idea of flight and escape, an escape really being about, the escape of death as well. So he can alight anywhere to any place in one of these monuments, bringing the ooze with him, and the ooze can transform, all of these things and for the better. This one is from my last one-person show at Leslie Heller in New York in the fall of 2019, which for me is sort of the most recent work, because, last year was very difficult to make work. So so I'm still sort of digesting this body of work. And I called the show Envisioning the Liquid Land. And this was the first work I made in the show. And I really was thinking about, in this moment, of that previous body of drawing works, but also of works that were like in the Vistas series, and how those two things were coming together, those two avenues were coming together. And yes, and this is the first one I made, and it's called Reflection Pool, and its Reflection Pool actually is one of the nail polish colors that is in this what I call the sensation code on the bottom right hand. Yes, and I think for me in ways, you know, because I really don't think of myself as a political artist. I think of myself as a responsive artist. And it's interesting in the last couple of years, people have been asking me to respond to things. So really in this show, I think it's for me the first time that I really, you know, made work sort of with those ideas in mind. Um, this one is called All the White Stuff, and it's actually part of a diptych. All the White Stuff is nail polish color by Sally Hansen. Um, and I think of this as my history painting. If this is my history painting of the Americas. Yeah, so I think hopefully this detail is there. Yeah, so in this detail, you know, you can see sort of the black ooze there, but in, you know, in this predominantly whitewashed kind of field, you know, you can see those three ships there, the cross, you know, there's white feathers in the ooze. You know, I think for me in the moment related to, you know, this idea of tarring and feathering people. Anyway, I thought in a way this really sort of encapsulated, you know, 400 years of history. Okay, and it's paired with this piece, which is Invincible. And Invincible is another nail polish color. Interestingly enough, but not surprisingly, you know, until maybe very recently, all the black or really dark colored nail polish colors always have these either negative names or over sexualized kind of names. So it was really interesting to find one that didn't have that, you know, that it didn't have a negative name. It's, you know, it's dark. It, you know, it reads as black, but it has like green, like to it, like lean, this green undertone to it. So this is Invincible. And I think the last thing I'll tell you guys about as I finish up here. So just just before, just a little before my show, because this is included in this show, once again, walking around in Brooklyn, you know, in places that I've walked by forever and paid no attention to. But I was walking past the Henry Ward Beecher Monument that is in downtown Brooklyn at Cadman Plaza, and it was the first time I really looked at it. And I looked at it, and I was just noticing, I mean, besides he's this ridiculous scale compared to the other figures, you know, I looked at the little kids, it's a little boy and girl on the far right side, and then this African-American woman figure. And what I was noticing was that the little boy and girl figure just seems so generic when you look at their faces, right? But when you look at the African-American woman figure, she just seems so specific. And I thought to myself, this is somebody who lived at this time. This is somebody who this was modeled off of, you know? Who was she, you know? And in sort of in this arrangement, the little kids, you know, represent his love and devotion to children, and she's supposed to represent his, you know, abolitionist endeavors, you know, but she, you know, she isn't just this thing that articulates, you know, his history. She is very much part of the history. Anyway, so that said, this was one of the last pieces. Well, this is the last piece I made for the show. It was the last piece because I bought it in the morning of the opening and it was still wet. Anyway, but this is called Abstract Hair Drawn Away. Abstract hair is the Latin verb, which means to draw away. So I call this Abstract Hair Drawn Away. And I wanted to sort of make a monument to her, one that celebrates her, but one that in a way speaks to sort of, you know, the loss of time, the, you know, the sort of the idea of time not being linear. You know, the figures, the black resin figures, you could have seen this, kind of see the strata of her making and her becoming. You don't know whether she's falling coming into being or melting away, just like that yellow pedestal is melting away. And on the wall, there's this, so it's this idea of multiplying and amplifying her, right? So on the wall, you have this further multiplication of her in adoration of her and not of him particularly. And I just use my face as convenient model because in the moment of really connecting and identifying with her. And and there's that detail. And I think that's it for right now. I think that's all. I think that's it.
Thank you, Nicole. Great presentation. Are there any questions in the room at the moment?
Yes, Julia's back.
I can start. Because I'm so in love with all this narrative and materiality. That's huge for me. I adore that, and I'm working with resin too, and so I guess I'm also wondering what else you're using in that no escape hatch. What an amazing piece. What is the base? What's your substrate?
It's on paper.
That's what I thought.
It's just on paper. Yeah, it's just on paper, and I'm pouring on the resins and and embedding objects in it and painting over it and pouring nail polish into it. And it's in the making. It's almost like I think my making of it is almost it's echoing that idea around narrative and materiality, right? Like me sort of in the performance of making the narrative in a sense and responding to the materials. Yeah, because as you know, working with these resins, I like that we can't control everything. It's going to do what it's you have a limited amount of control, so you have to respond, and you have to respond quickly. You know what I mean? It's like, you can kind of set some things there and, and then let's see what gets covered. Let's see what gets, pushed aside. Let's see what gets included. Let's see where it wants to run, So I like that. I kind of like that. And I think it really does speak to the idea of sort of a narrative in the making.
And there's a spontaneity that comes through. Even in your drawn things, there's a spontaneity that it all flows so beautifully together.
Thank you. I hope so. Although, as I said, I don't know about these drawings anymore. And we'll see what happens next.
And abstract hair, that very last one. So are you creating, oh, that was so good. Are you creating a clay model and then making a mold of that? Or are you pouring resin on top of it?
How did I make that? I had to make some molds for her. Yes, I did have to make some molds for her. But, it took up so much material too. So you're also trying to find ways to cheat it a little bit. So there was some pour on, but they're definitely like her head and torso. I really had to make molds for, but otherwise there's fabrics that I'm pouring over and stiffening, you know how artists are. We make it happen through all kinds of, focus and focus. Yeah. And
Is anybody else? Because I'm also, and that's the responsive artist. That's kind of what you're talking about.
I really think you have to pay attention to what the artwork is telling you. I mean, I'm still in love with that. That's where it's almost like it must have a life of its own, and it just starts speaking to you if you'd only listened to it, and I just love when that happens. That's the best part. Oh my God, you thought you were doing this, but no, you're not doing this. You're gonna do that, And I think when we don't listen to that is when it just turns out bad. Come on, somebody else, jump in.
I have a question. I have a question around, well, I guess I'm kind of wondering, it's like this kind of sort of an off-ball question, but I started wondering if music has a function in your work. I started thinking about like the visual, like when I look at your work, there's a lot of like visual lyricism, but also rhythm, right? And so I start wondering if there's like an influence, like that as part of the work, but also I'm like really interested in the way that you balance like symbolic representation along with like material history. There's like some really interesting things happening there where sometimes like they collide together, but then sometimes like they are in contrast with one another. And I was hoping that maybe there was something there that you could elaborate more on, but maybe not, I don't know.
Well, you know, here, I don't know if I'm not thinking specifically about music, but what I find interesting that you pick up on, that I agree, this idea there is a lyricism and a rhythm. And I don't know if that is connected to, you know, what we're talking about of what happens sort of being in tune with the materials as you're using them and responding to them. But I really like that you said that, because it's true. There is a rhythm in it, and there is a lyricism. But I don't know if it has to do with music, or maybe it's more of a rhythm in here. You know what I mean? That's more definitely. And it's true in terms of symbols. You know, I think I'm very aware of when they are part of something and when they are in contrast with something. And I think when they're in something, it is either to highlight or direct or redirect a reading of something, you know? So I think I am mostly very aware of sort of when and where I'm placing those things. Yes, for sure. Go ahead, Raja, please.
As you're talking about the sort of that ooze kind of taking its own path, so to speak, what's the time? I'm trying to imagine as you're working on it, do you start with that and then sort of kind of work through it over, like, I'm just trying to imagine what's the time period, you know, as you're working with that, and then there are more drawn in, more maybe like carefully drawn in elements, and I was trying to think, do those kind of come somewhere in between pouring and the ooze, or before, or
well, the full work could take as long as, you know, whatever, but you're right. And when I'm at the stage where I'm pouring, you're at the mercy of the resin that you're using. Most of the resins that I use, I really probably have tops 15 to 18 minutes to manipulate it, right? Yeah. And you know, once that's there, it's there. You know, so I might, you know, I probably start the drawing as a, you know, as the drawing, sort of an underlying drawing, and you know, as I said, in my arrogance, think that, okay, this should go here, maybe this is here, this is it, blah blah blah, you know, and then you do your pour, and then you end up with, okay, all right, well, we have to rethink this, so we need to shift this, so we need to do that, right? You know, but so yes, that pouring time is fixed, but then the working time in terms of what you end up adding afterwards, I mean, the things that get embedded in the ooze itself, I think that is what I'm most concerned about, you know, hoping that I get it to fall in the right place or stay in the right position, or, you know, as much as I can, you know. But even that, you know, even when it takes it away, sometimes somebody takes it and flips it or does something with it that's even more interesting than you thought it would be. So you're like, okay, all right, let's roll with that.
Sounds good, thank you. I guess just a quick other question. What kind of pigments do you add to get that black kind of pigments to the resin?
You know, there are resins that I use that are already that color.
Oh,
There are dyes, because sometimes you don't want things opaque, so there's also dyes that you can add to as well. I've also added paints to the resin. I think particularly acrylic paint is probably best for that. I've added dry pigments to the paint. You know, you know, actually, I find the resins more forgiving than you expect. You know, so you shouldn't be afraid to experiment. You know, and I think our technology around that is like, you know, if you're in a properly ventilated space, nothing is going to explode and kill you. It's all right. It's all fine. It's okay.
thank you so much.
I know. Go
I
ahead.
have a, oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have another question regarding the black ooze. You said something about, you know, reflecting the pliable nature of it, or the perceived pliable nature of it, that there was this expansion or contraction of time that exists within that. And I was wondering, is that like universe within the black ooze, is that an expansion or contraction of time like within this world? Or is it like, do you see it as sort of parallel or something? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, and if you're talking here, that's the whole thing. You know, there was some photo work that I had done around 2006, where I had gone back to Trinidad, and I was thinking of these. I was thinking of these photographs I had for when I was a child, around 5, on the beaches there, you know. And I don't know why those things had stuck in my head. So, you know, anyway, and I really wanted to go back there to those beaches with some aspect of those photographs. And what I ended up doing was this: in the photographs, I was wearing this polka dot orange and white bikini. Loved this thing, you know, wore it endlessly when I was 5. I mean, I have a clear memory of it, and I loved it because, you know, it would suntan my bottom, polka dots. Anyway, another story. But I think in that, you know, feeling the empowerment, there was something about a sense of empowerment at 5 that I think most girl bodies have, that society eats away at. But anyway, that's another story with, you know, that goes into that. But going back to the time issue. So I refabricated that bikini the best I could, made it physically. And in the lining of the bikini, so in the crotch and in the bra top lining, I printed those pictures of me in those there, right? Took the bikini back to those beaches when I went back there, set them up, right? I took this series of photographs. So it's photographs, like one photograph is like the bikini's in the foreground. So the crotch of the bikini panty is right here. You know, my friend is standing at the edge of the beach far off, but she's about the same size as the images in the crotch, right? Yeah. And, you know, it was really this thing about, well, what is more real? You know what I mean? Is the place or the time, right? What actually is more linear? What actually is more immediate? What actually is more physical, right? What is the depth of that? You know, is the permanence really in here, or is the permanence really here? So in a sense, it was about time and materiality once again, right? Yeah. So I think in the ooze sort of really encapsulates everything and brings everything together, where everything is malleable, everything is far away and touching at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Everything is immediate and distant. Everything, it's all there. It's all there. It warps all our perception. Yeah. And the things that we you know, sort of the idea we have that puts order to things. It's not, it just obliterates all of that. Did
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's an amazing answer. Thank you.
I hope it did.
I guess I'd be curious what that makes Darby think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I think about often, just generally about how we perceive time and space, and how they're interwoven and whatnot. And I think that that's such an interesting concept, and I'd love. I'm gonna have to try to find those photographs of yours online so I can see them. But that's an amazing.
My website is such a hot mess. It so needs to be taken care of. You guys need to. You don't have no excuse. I could use, being a bit older. You need a good Oh Lord, I think I need a residency just to fix mine. But they might be on there. I have to go see, but I think they're probably online somewhere. You can find them for sure. But I know where one is. One is in the catalog for Infinite Island. One of those photographs is in the catalog for Infinite Island. That was at the Brooklyn Museum in 2007 and 2008. I think it's the one that I'm talking about. Yeah, I think it's in there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Sapphire, I think there's a question you want to ask me.
I don't have a question yet.
Okay. Melanie.
I had a question about how, because you brought it up like for a minute or like a second, but it was about sort of the differentiation that you have between being a responsive artist and a political artist. And I was curious how you define both of those and how you side more with being a responsive artist.
It's very astute of you to pick up on that. Yes. It's something that that's really floating around in my head, and I'm really considering myself. No, I don't think of myself as a political artist. I think we're in a moment where, and this has been artists throughout history, we have the ability to sort of mirror and reflect the world in a way that gives it a comprehension that's even sometimes beyond, what's in front of your face kind of thing. It's something that we have the ability to do. The problem I have with that is when society wants to prescribe that we must do that. I'm only resistant in the sense that for the innovation and the wonderful things that we could bring to the world, it can't be siloed into categories, right? And designating somebody a political artist takes away from the scope on the range of what their practice can do at any given point in time. I was always somebody who, I believed that artists, we actually most of us move back and forth and in between, various, from abstraction to representation and back, right? Yeah. I think my work speaks to, is on some line of all of that all the time, right? I wouldn't want somebody to fix me as a figurative artist or as an abstract artist. So that's more the thing that I am concerned about. And I think that's why I rather say that at times I could be a responsive artist. Yes. Because I think that's what we naturally do. And I think to have that, at least that expectation is better than there being some expectation of you being a political artist or an activist. I'm not saying if you feel okay and identify as that, and you know what I mean, and feel invested in that in a specific way, and don't mind that, delineating sort of your practice, then that's fine. I'm just saying, I'm just wary of, us being put into those silos, in the long run. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Now she has a question for me. Go ahead.
History.
Mhm.
I'm curious what you're reading because you brought up a lot of I guess facts that I haven't heard before. So yeah.
Oh, which facts particularly?
You're talking about the bird. You were talking about a bird, and that's all I remember.
Oh, you're talking about the piece where I had the double-headed. He's a double-headed bird. Yeah,
yeah.
I was talking about creation myths in the Americas. All the native folks, right through the indigenous cultures, have amazing creation myths for the world, for just to describe different phenomena that they, whatever ability we had at any given time in the history of mankind, right? We use that to describe what's happening, yes,
Yeah.
to make sense of a thing. And I just find that fascinating because here we are in this moment, and we have all this technology, and I still don't think we know what's really happening. So, what's the difference between their creation myth and our creation myth, really? It's like our myth of ourselves right now,
Like, how do you research? Do you go back to like a certain point, or do you, because you talk about time a lot too, and so
Well, my second love is history. I've always been interested in history. And as an artist, art history was really interesting to me because of my love for history, but just history in general, and particularly history in the Americas. I always laugh and tell people, when because I went to school in Trinidad, when I was in primary school, so I can't know, what grade is that up to here? I can't remember right now. Anyway, whatever you are until you're like 11, 12 years old. When I was in primary school, when I was leaving, I was awarded not the school art prize. I was awarded the school history prize, right? I was in love with the Mayas, the Aztecs, the thing. I used to draw all the temples, the stuff, and it's like, that was my jam, right? And it's funny. And my best friend at the time got the school art prize. It wasn't me, it was her. And although I've been making art, since I was 3, that was just interesting. So I think history has always sort of been in my head as I make things anyway, right? That awareness of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Andrea.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to ask about the specimens from local ephemera series. So you had said that Resistance with Black Ooze one, that was the first piece?
That was the first piece where the ooze was black.
Where the ooze was black.
And from then on, it just seemed right. You know what I mean? It was just like, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, because I think, when it was red, white, and blue, it was obviously sort of a commentary on, but here, it was one aspect of my work that has been there always is I'm interested too, and it really fits into the ooze as well. We live in these dualities and multiplicities and multiple perspectives. One thing is something for one person, completely the other thing for the next person, right? Yeah. So that's something that's always been in there. So I think when I was doing that oozing red, white, and blue, and it actually had a couple of manifestations, that was just the best one for me. I was thinking, what those colors in terms of nationhood meant to people. In America, red, white, and blue is something else. Red, white, and blue is also the flags of Great Britain, France, Cuba, blah, 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 right? So everybody has these different perspectives and different ideas around society and freedom and culture when they say that. You know what I mean? When they refer to that. So I think, I was really thinking about that sort of, we live in these multiplicities, these multiple truths, right? And I'm just laughing now because, that work was back then, but if I'm thinking about that work right now, it makes me laugh even more. you know, what is, you know, even within our country, you know, what do those ideas mean if you are, you know, whatever coast or in the middle of the country you might find yourself, or Melanie here in Texas. It's interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the figures that come together, the waist, did that originally come from that doll that was given to you, or and are those, is
what,
that
the rum bottle, or you're talking about the, which one?
I'm looking, I have your website open, and I had been looking at the pieces before before the talk, but there's a lot of drawings of figures.
Oh, the double-sided figure.
And is that representing duality or multiplicity? Are these like two? Yeah, I guess I wanted to know more about.
No, but that was, you know, I think for one thing in my work, it's always these layers of meaning, and I don't, it's not about me directing the viewer to get all of it. I think our responsibility is to cue folks in. Then, you know, you bring your life experience to stuff. But yes, that was the idea of duality and multiplicity, to me, resonated in that double-sided figure. And, you know, it was I only used it in sort of its original form in that one piece that I showed you, right? Because I wanted to sort of also take advantage of what it sort of meant historically in that form, right? It's that antebellum, whatever word, right? After that, it no longer, you know, I didn't use it with that characterization at all, right? After that, I was really thinking more of sort of the idea around multiplicity. You know, I wasn't thinking it so much as a body or representation of a female body, more as sort of a visual kind of abstraction in terms of ideas, right? You know, and started to use myself as a convenient model more than anything else, yeah. But there are times when, especially in the last works that I showed you, that, well, they're not really that serious, they're a new thing in themselves, right, from my last show. When I put myself in there, I actually was for the first time using myself on purpose. I never fill in and color the figures, no. But I think, you know, on the strength of my features, I think that was very important as part of the narrative in those works, right? You know, I'm obviously this body that can only have become the body that I am because I'm part of the history of the Americas, you know. I am this Afro-Asian, and there's also European, you know, that could only have come into existence in our wonderful and horrific history of the Americas, right? Yeah. So that was the only time I was like really kind of aware of the figure in that way. Julia, come on. Yeah, Brazil has to ask me a question, man. Come on, represent.
I don't know if my question is gonna make much sense, but since history is so since history is so important for your work and you were always interested in it, even in school. I don't know how the school system was when you were a kid, and I don't know when you moved to the US. But when did you start to decolonize your resources? Because I feel like this history that I've learned as a child in Latin America is very different from what I grew up to learn. So it's a process, and I feel like a lot of people are not really aware that the history that we think is history is just a narrative that was chosen. Right. So I was wondering when you started decolonizing, and also the contrast. I don't know what age you went to the US, but if you were a little bit.
Listen, your question actually is a really good question, honey. I am from the Anglophone Caribbean. We have always been very invested and owned our Blackness and our history in that way. The thing that my country has given to the Americas is our historians and writers who have being invested in the truth of history. So Dr. Eric Williams, right, who brought my country into independence, but who is a great historian, wrote the seminal text From Columbus to Castro that is used all over the Americas, right, about the real history of the Americas. So really and truly, I'm fortunate in that I didn't have to go through the decolonization process. What I came up against is coming to the States and realizing, oh shoot, you people don't know this stuff. And asking me crap like, you know, because I came to the States, moved back to this, I started college in the States in 87, moved here officially in 89. But, you know, I had people in, you know, when I was in college, ask me stuff about if we wear clothes, if we live in trees. And I'm like, how could any of my fellow citizens in the Americas not know anything about anything? This is crazy, you know? So yeah, so it's interesting. And I know in sort of in Latin America, there's very much, as I think most North Americans don't know, there's very much been a resistance to sort of the true histories of those spaces as well, especially sort of the histories around the African presence in the Latin world. So yeah, but you know, those things are coming out now, and you know, and there are many people and many good artists who are owning the totality of their identities and their experience. So yeah, and Julia, my love, you could be part of that. So there you go. You know, you come from a country that is so invested and influenced by that, and yet so many people, you know, don't know about that history or don't understand how essential that history is to the Brazilian culture and life. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Welcome. Roger, go ahead.
This makes me really curious about your teaching philosophy and your teaching style, since you're also a professor. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that, you know, as an artist, but also a teacher.
Okay, you know, here, I don't think of myself as a teacher. I'm an artist who happens to teach. Sometimes, you know, I think, you know, especially when I'm working with graduate students like yourselves, I just think of it as, you know, a more experienced artist working with younger artists. The world artists, you know, and I'm just interested in helping you, you know, actualize what you are interested in as an artist, not my interests, yours, you know. I'm actually the opposite of some folks. I you know, when I'm teaching, you know, when I'm interacting with graduate students, I'm not talking about my work much. No, you know, if you happen to know it, fine. If you don't, that's okay too. That's not what's important. What's important is, what are you interested in bringing to this, right? What do you want to make art about? What is this for you? I'm not interested in you trying to please me or mimic my vision. I'm just interested in you evolving the things you're interested in. You know, I think the worst thing a student can ask me is what to make. I'm not here to tell you what to make. I'm here to ask myself what I'm making. You know, you need to, you know, you need to know what you want to make, and then I can help you from there.
Thank you so much. Sounds good. Thanks.
Are there any other last questions for Nicole? Yeah, Molly.
I observed that you, especially like the rum bottle drummer man drawing that you did a very long time ago, you seem to have a sort of aversion to the 2D drawing medium that doesn't have any multimedia aspects to it. And I was curious if that's because it doesn't speak as much, like materiality wise, or if there's like less spontaneity or responsiveness that's happening from the piece.
Oh, God.
So
You know, I think I've misled you. I don't think I have an aversion to it at all.
Okay.
As I said, my practice moves between 2 and 3D, and a lot of things start as a drawing in that way. I love drawing. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Yeah. But I think at times, if I'm listening to the work, it wants to release itself. It does, all of a sudden there'll be something in that illusionistic space that it's like, it just wants to pop out and come out into the world. And I just, I allow it to do so. I think that's all that it is. It's always with me, this emerging and submerging, it's pushing in and out, reaching. Yeah, but a drawing can do that as well, so I don't want you to think it can't. I think the thing that's hampering many painters today is that I think they see painting in a very limited way, or having a very limited expectation of what it can do, even just with paint and your brushes, or even just with, basic drawing materials, and I think that is what is maybe handicapping, disabling, I should say, some folks now in terms of painting.
I guess I want to maybe I want to ask a question about that, because like so much of your work is about material, but then also representation of the symbolic, right? And then there are times when you pour, but then there are times when you put something up on the wall, and then there are sometimes when things get peeled off of the wall. It seems like there's also a search for like how to extend the language of painting in your work. And I start kind of like wondering, so it's like the way that you think about it is like painting. Like, I guess I'm kind of wondering how you, at this moment in time, given this, like your work probably like, has shifted over time. How do you define what painting is versus what sculpture is?
I almost think about it like that is to stop it in its tracks.
Yeah.
If I stop and think about it like that, then I don't think I'd think about these things. I don't think I'd make these things, I mean, the one interesting thing I've noticed sort of in the history of contemporary art is that it seems like folks who are painters seem to be able to make interesting sculpture, and I don't really find it the other way around. And I think it's because of the way they're thinking about it. You know what I mean? Somehow there seems to be more fluidity or, wiggle room in terms of the way that painters seem to be able to think about some things, and as opposed to the way sculptors are able to think about it. Yes, but I think it's very much because of the way it's considered.
Yeah.
Does that make, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can make associations with that for sure. Yeah, it's a lot for me to go off of. So. If there are any other questions in our Zoom, are there any more? Okay. Nicole, it was so wonderful to hear you talk about your work and to answer our questions and to be in conversation with us. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and talking to us today.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you guys. Great questions. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, man. Lovely. Thank you for having me.
So much.
I hope it's a sunny day in Texas today.
It is. It's lovely. Actually,
great.
Finally, right, Melanie? It's lovely.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye, guys. See you.
Thank you.